Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And we are presenting today Presence and the Field of Possibilities. And to do that, it is Bobby Cobb and me, Miriam Siegel, to talk about that.
And Fred Blum will be joining us shortly. He just messaged our little private group, said he's working on a quick tech issue and then he's planning on joining us. So
We have to do something about Fred and his tech issues. Speaking of the field of possibilities, because there's so many tech issues. Ah, God
yeah.
love him. Well, want to say anything about, are you in the field of possibilities today, Bobby? Or in this moment?
I feel like I'm sitting smack dab in the middle of the field. Absolutely.
You actually just said something to me about being 24,000 days old. Was that right?
I will be on Wednesday.
It'll be on Wednesday.
Yeah, I was playing around. We do a little full moon ceremony at the library and spiritual center that I belong to. And so I was just like playing with that. And I tapped something into Chat GPT and it said to me, back to me, since I had been alive for 23,998 days, it was valid to assume that I've been alive for so many lunar cycles. And that number just stuck. I'm like, wait, 23,998 feels like I'm looking at an odometer on a car that's about to roll over to the next exciting number. So yeah.
Like a millennium shift or whatever, it just goes to
Yeah,
zero,
kind
zero,
of.
zero.
Yeah, that's I'm hitting 24,000. Yeah, I'm hitting a new millennia on Wednesday. So yeah, that's
Is that
exciting.
doing something with you? Like, I've given the topic is the field of possibilities. Is it like, oh my goodness, 24,000, it's been a long time? Or is it like, oh, what's the next possibility?
Um, uh, not that I'm consciously aware of. I just I thought it was a neat number. I do think of, we are so locked into the calendar of time that we have created. And I think one thing that it's done is got us a little bit out of harmony with nature, just kind of the way it unfolds. And I've been like the shows I've been watching have either been westerns that are taking place 150 years ago, or I've just fallen onto this show about the life of Jesus.
Oh,
And, so, I mean, there was no watches and, if anything, they had sundials back then. And it just is like harmonizing with the natural ebbs and flows that are happening us all around is curious. So, just something to contemplate a little, but no significant
well, speaking of
meaning at
ebbs and
all.
flows, here comes Fred.
All right.
Look
Hello.
at that
Hello. We were, oh,
shirt. I
I
don't.
like it.
Hey,
We were just talking ebbs and flows, and she
I
says,
heard you.
Speaking of ebbs, here comes Fred."
I'm sure that means something.
Ebbs
We
and
don't know
flows, in
what.
and out. And your
Well, we
tech
are
is,
talking about the field of possibilities, I think, today. So,
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And your
we're
possibility was getting your tech working to join us
boy,
on
I'll
this.
tell you, it's just like a thrill a minute trying to get on these things.
There's this guy I know, he's absolutely fantastic. I'm taking a course of his right now. His name's Clay Moffat,
Uh-huh.
and he is amazing. But this guy he's got tech issues like I've never seen anybody have tech issues before. But just put a plug in for him because he is really, really something. So, but just don't count on his tech. There's possibilities for improvement for him and for you, Fred.
Always endless.
So we actually started talking about the field of possibilities in connection with last week's topic, which was presence and emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that, but we did. And how not it's an opposite of emptiness, but it's almost like a possibility within emptiness is a field of possibilities. Like there's the emptiness that is, I feel empty and there's no point, but then there's the emptiness in presence, which is everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just infinite possibility. And it feels completely different. So that's kind of how we got talking about the field of possibilities. Does that jog anybody's not jog your memory, but your little gray cells?
Well, I was just going to comment that at least what I notice, and you guys tell me if it does this for you too, like even talking about this, like pointing to something like emptiness or field of possibilities. I don't know if I would exactly describe it as my gray cells, but I immediately feel something settle in me, or expand or become more still. And so I think there's something that suggests to me that this is a valuable topic,
Well, and something to add to that, because in thinking about this, it seems to me that people that are just beginning a presence practice and to live life more mindfully and being more in the moment, I feel like for like the new adventurer in presence, the idea that anything is possible, that anything can happen, can be overwhelming. And it's like the emptiness that we talked about last week implies a doing nothing, and like the idea that you can do anything, that that there is an unlimited number of options that are available. For many people, it is a frightening concept. So first of all, let me just ask it, do you guys have that experience? Is that something that you're familiar with, or is that something that's just unique through this prism that I'm looking through?
You mean like what? Infinite possibilities being scary? Something like that?
Yeah, or just the idea. So I guess in one way, I'm thinking of like if you are living life on a mission. And to use your example from the Whiplash movie a couple of weeks back, that guy simply was not going to be denied showing up at the recital. There was no room for any other possibility in his mind. And that is in some ways a very attractive set of goggles to be looking at the world through. And the idea of giving that up, of having, what are you going to do tomorrow? I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing when I wake up tomorrow. That can be a scary proposition for some people. At least it seems that way from my experience. I don't find it scary, and I don't know if I can honestly look back and wonder if there was a time that I did find it scary. I can easily imagine that there was a time that I was very attached to having all 168 hours of a week planned out in my calendar, including like a scheduled bedtime and a scheduled workout and everything. I was pretty scripted for a long time.
This has me thinking about the idea of infinite possibilities as being an unbelievable concept, right? Because it's not possible for me to jump from a height without some sort of safety net or parachute or bungee cord or something, or I'll die most likely, right? Or It's not possible for me to run more quickly than Usain Bolt or, some Olympic runner or whatever. Like it's not possible. That's not that necessarily the possibilities that we're talking about, although opening up to a possibility that is limitless does present other possibilities that we may not have thought of. The other thing I think of is when it comes to infinite possibility or opening up to possibilities is, and of course the thought just went right on. Oh yeah, the difference between doing possibility and being possibility. For me, the thought of doing possibility is like chasing, like you're talking about the whiplash example, right? I'm going to get there, and this is the only option. And so I'm working really hard, right? I'm focused and I'm desperately I'm going to, make sure this happens and fight anybody that tries to stop me or whatever, versus relaxing into presence and being and allowing the possibilities to come to me. Because in that spaciousness of the present moment, whatever is possible is there already. So just allowing it to come to me. And that can be really difficult for people to grasp who are not trained or used to being in the spaciousness, in the emptiness. Those are my thoughts anyway, and my experience.
I think whenever we talk about, and this is a little more abstract for us as Posse, usually our topics, we usually get pretty out there as we go, but we usually start from a more concrete place. I missed last week, presence and emptiness, presence and possibility. But I think whenever we start talking about terms like emptiness, possibility, and really, presence and. So what does it mean to be present in emptiness? I guess that's last week's topic. So as tempting as it is, I won't go there.
You can.
Presence and possibility. It's like we can look at that from the perspective of like a me, like an ego. And I'm using it almost from that perspective as a tool, as a method to try and get what I want. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I don't mean to say ego like it's a dirty word or something, because we have an ego and the ego does want stuff. The challenge is that the ego usually wants stuff as an attempt to prove its own worthiness or to try and find some temporary happiness or distraction from its own misery. But if I'm present from the perspective of what I call true self, we all use some similar terms like that. If I'm present from the perspective of true self to possibility, somehow it's like it seems more open. It's like there's not as much of a need, kind of like Bobby was talking about scheduling his week. There's not as much of a need to control how that possibility unfolds. And I think that's beautiful and maybe not very practical for most of us, or at least like if there really is a part of me that wants something, and there is, and I suspect there always will be, then I think it's the meeting of those two. It's the meeting of the part of me that wants something, like the egoic part, but letting that part be more in service to the true self, such that it just becomes a game. Like I make a game out of what's possible, and I do it because it's fun and it's exciting, as opposed to doing it because I think it's going to somehow make my life better, or maybe people will look at me and they'll see how brilliant I am or something, And when I'm coming from the perspective of who I really am, from true self, I know that my worthiness and my happiness and my well-being is already intrinsic. It's built in. So I don't have to seek it and all that stuff. That just becomes a game that I can play just for the joy of playing then.
I like that. One of the things that I've noticed too, though, is as we, I deal with a lot of financial advisors who are switching firms from one firm to another. And for the financial advisor and for the firm, if it works out well, and if everything goes according to the plan, it's going to be a huge boon both for the new firm and for the advisor, and they're all going to make out like bandits, and everybody's going to be happy. Very few people make that the choice to do that strategically. They tend to do it more on impulse, and there'll be something that'll go wrong at their current firm. They'll throw their hands up and say, I've had enough. Then they'll start shopping themselves to other firms, and typically they pick the best deal that they can negotiate with somebody else. But then that's when the real stress starts to happen, because it doesn't take long before the advisor begins to wonder, did I make a mistake? And the firm that paid out this big upfront bonus money begins to wonder the same thing. That causes tension. And that goes, now the advisor needs to recruit their existing clients to make the move with them. And there's laws against doing that. So they have to play this weird little dance that everybody knows how to play, because they've been breaking these rules for as long as the rules have existed. And one of the things that I've noticed is it's a very stressful circumstance, often because they only have a plan A. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to execute. And boom, I'm going in. And then if I'm working with them, I say, well, what if that doesn't work? And often the first answer that I get back is, well, it has to work. I'll make it work, which just seems like a terrible strategy to go in. And in the coaching, we go through brainstorming sessions where we not only get plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F, and usually around plan F or G, when I'm saying, what if that doesn't work? They'll say, we'll never get there. If, these 5 or 6 that we've come up with are not enough, then I didn't have a very good relationship with my clients, and I'm fine. And so now to me, it seems like that is very calming and allows them to stay present and stay focused on what their job is. And it was because we explored all of those possibilities and saw that there are enormous options that are available, that they have the peace of mind to work through the task that they have set for themselves with a little bit more of mental clarity and inner tranquility. And but in my experience with these people who spend their lives planning and setting goals and reaching them and doing that for their clients, they haven't turned that microscope to themselves. And as they do, they begin to have a new appreciation of the whole process. But it begins with an open table. And I guess when I think of that, if we assume that nothing is set in stone, that anything can happen, that's when we're standing at the, on the edge of the field of all possibilities. And it can be a scary place. To me, I find it an extremely exciting place, and a yummy energy to be sitting in.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here on this yummy theme. in the field of possibilities, because there's something about anything's possible. A person who is living with a violent partner. Now, we've talked about this every once in a while. It comes up, and it's usually me saying something about if you're in physical danger, you might want to actually find somewhere else, get yourself to safety first. And I mean, part of being present is also seeing what's there and accepting what's there and then acting on what's there. And then we say, as we sit here and talk about the field of possibilities, that in every given moment, there are infinite possibilities. So that could be misinterpreted by a person in that kind of situation as, oh, well, if I just wait a bit and stay with the moment, the other person will change somehow, or some other possibility will show up where I should just stay put. Does that make sense to you guys? That can be misunderstood as I shouldn't actually leave, but I should stay and allow all the possibilities, like my violent partner will no longer be violent. You see what I'm getting at?
I don't think that's what was the word? Devil's advocate. I mean, I think that there's, you just have to be able to. To me, honestly, this is not like an odds thing. Like, you don't want to look and say, well, you could. It's not a wrong choice, but like one option, I guess, would be to say, okay, he's beaten me every day for the past 6 months. What are the odds that he's going to stop tomorrow? And that could be a viable reason to, like, just look at it like, well, infinite, is it an infinite possibility that he might stop tomorrow? Yes. In the world of anything could happen, that's a possibility. But in the world that you live in, maybe you should, as you put, get to safety first. And that's where I think it's useful to trust something else besides your thinking when making decisions like this. And whether you want to call it your gut or your heart or intuition, there's a knowing that we all have access to, I believe. And that comes from, by the way, the same place that emptiness and infinite possibilities come from. So if we can really align ourselves with this, as opposed to some concept in your head, I know in an infinite universe, my husband could stop beating me someday. I don't know. There's a phrase, God helps those who help themselves. And I'm sure there's lots of others that might put that into perspective. So yeah, I wouldn't want anyone to use the stuff we're saying as an excuse to, be out of touch with reality, like on this plane, like jumping out windows and all that stuff. There are physical laws. There are odds. There are things that we have to consider in this world. And if we're not considering them, then we're probably in denial or, something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I have two thoughts on that. One is it's a good idea not to confuse possibility with probability. Mm-hmm. And so somebody once said, I can't remember who, that, every action is a probability. Every potential action is a probability amplitude in the field of all possibilities. And I don't even pretend to know exactly what that statement means, but I think I get the idea of it. Just that there's a big difference between probability. Is he going to, if he's been beating you for 1,000 days, is he going to stop beating you tomorrow? Probably not. Could happen. And it's good to think that could happen. But the other thing that I look at there is, if I was having a conversation with that person, I would invite consideration that you could leave, even though if we're sitting here saying, and we have good evidence to back this up, there's a 99 point something % probability she's not going to leave. the mere fact that she could invites a broader conversation. You know, the moment that it's not her feeling locked in and a prisoner, which she could easily be a prisoner in her own mind. But the moment that she begins to realize, well, I could leave, I could pack up a backpack, grab a bike, and just start riding away. May not be very practical, but the moment that we begin to invite that into the conversation, I think one thing happens. We can now begin to say, okay, you're choosing to stay here. And then you're going to have probably lots of conversation around why I have to make that decision. So we can start to loosen that up. But the other thing I feel like it does is, and this is the work going back to the financial advisors, get them thinking about other things that they could be doing in addition to what they've already thought about. And that exercise is just to give them a goal, it's an exercise to give them the benefits of having gone through the exercises, that you have lots of options. The well of ideas on how we can make this work is virtually endless. And it just changes the conversation. So, you know, and I think not only can somebody have that jump to that conclusion, they're likely to jump to that conclusion, particularly early in the conversation. So are you just saying that if I sit here and meditate, then magically he's going to not stop beating me? And, you know, that would just be another stop along, another milepost on the, you know, the journey of the conversation.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And while I was listening to you, I was thinking about, I mean, our topic is the field of possibilities, and inviting that field into any situation, right? Being open to that field in any given situation. So, for example, in the case where a person is being beaten, and for example, using the excuse that, oh, well, I brought it on myself, I deserve it, or I made him angry or her angry or whatever, and so I get beaten. Inviting the field of possibility into that very moment is, are you aware that there's another possibility? Would you be willing to consider another possibility? It's like, what if there's somebody who won't beat you for doing the exact same thing? For example, what if there were another way to react to whatever you're doing? I don't think I would. I mean, I'm a therapist, so sometimes it's not helpful to say, what if it's not you? That doesn't tend to work well, but just sort of introducing there may be another set of responses to your behavior that does not involve beating you or harming you in any particular way. Would you be willing to consider that possibility? And listening to you talk about the financiers and whatever, in any given situation, really, the opportunity to invite that field in, to open and broaden a perspective. Because very often we'll get focusing on one thing, like they're saying, oh, I have to get these clients and I have to do it this way, or I have to get to the party, or whatever I have to do. And it's done like this. And I know that if I do this, this will happen. It's like, well, would you be willing to consider another perspective? Would you be open to looking at other possibilities? Am I willing to open myself up to something else? And I think a lot of times people don't even notice that they're stuck in a rut. They've gotten onto it. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever been skiing, but sometimes the ski will get stuck in the track and you can't get it out. It's kind of like that. You get stuck in a place, focusing on a thing, and don't notice that there's just all of this going on, and there, and even behind them. So just for people who may not have lots of experience with this idea of the field of possibility, it can be an invitation, anything painful or anything joyful, and anything in between. is
Mhm.
still inviting this field of possibility. What else?
Well, I
Is
love the metaphor of the rut, because that's really all it is, and we can get very focused on the rut. It's funny. I probably mentioned here before somewhere that I study martial arts. I've been doing that for a long time, and I had kind of one of those little moments that actually is a big moment recently, when we were doing something very simple. Like somebody was grabbing my wrist, maybe, and in the particular arts that I study, it's not just about getting your wrist free. It's about studying yourself. What happens when someone grabs your wrist? How do I react? Do I tense up? Do I stop breathing? Do they, as my training partner, for example, disappear and just become like a piece of meat that I have to overcome? So there's a lot that we explore. And the piece that I saw recently was when they grabbed my wrist, I would become fixated on this instead of the practically endless possibilities in my body for what actually was free to move and do anything that it wanted to do. I look at the one thing that I can't move, that is not readily available, and I want to make this piece conform to my will. And when I look at what's open, what's working, what's already available, it just makes life so much easier.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one other piece I wanted to share, because we're talking a lot recently in the last part of the conversation about like what would be possible for this other person, or what other possible choices could I make? And I really want to emphasize that shift towards ourselves. Like, what would be possible for the other person? Like, it's possible they might stop beating me, versus what's possible for me. It's a very different shift. And again, it shifts the focus from outside to inside. And while, again, in an infinite universe, I suppose it's possible that this person might stop out there, it seems like we have more influence or something on the possibilities within ourselves, Like I have more influence on the choices that I can make than on the choices someone else can make. And the different kind of fields of possibilities that my different choices lead to. I think Bobby was alluding to that. So starting with myself, rather than trying to impose, make magical things happen in the universe, maybe I just start with seeing what's possible for me in terms of choices I can make or actions I can take that might be different, ways I can look at things, different perspectives that maybe I hadn't seen before, like Miriam, you were talking about, Miriam.
Wonderful. There's this, I think about movies where I tend to get, I laugh at them. And I like to watch like crime series and stuff like that. I used to want to be a policeman. So, and I like solving mysteries. So there's sort of little mini
Well, you still do that.
And yeah, I guess I still do that. Thank you. But there's inevitably in many of these a scene where somebody's being strangled, right? And what ends up happening is they're being strangled and they do this, and they're trying to get, they're trying to get the hands off, and they're doing the hands and the arms, and every single time, and pretty much every single time, I'm like, well, kick him between the legs, or like the rest of you is available. Why are you grabbing that? Poke his eyes out. Do something other than what's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The hands are around here, or they've got a wire, right? The likelihood that you're going to get your fingers out to that, it's just not going to happen. Or at least, well, in the field of possibilities, anything's possible, but you might want to try something else.
Yeah.
And it never fails that they're here, right? And it's kind of what you're talking about, Fred. It's like, okay, the one thing I can't, but we do it so often, don't we? We focus on the pain point, or whatever's irritating about that other person, or the not possible. Even people, Bobby, you're mentioning people, they switch their jobs because something's not working, instead of, yeah, but what else? Because that's kind of like a geographical cure. Like the 12-step programs will talk about a geographical cure. Well, I'm going to go somewhere else. It'll be better. And it's like, how do you know? Right? What you're probably doing is taking yourself with you to the new situation and ending up in the same situation sooner or later. because again, as Fred pointed out, the focus hasn't been on you. That's right. It's what am I doing and what are my possibilities? I'm just focusing on the pain point, and that's not necessarily going to get me anywhere. It's not, there aren't many possibilities necessarily there. The field of possibilities is endless. And that means I need to include more.
Well, that's a survival thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's literally a different part of your brain. You know, where's Malcolm? But we can talk about this without Malcolm. Malcolm's our neuro guy for anybody who might be watching.
I've done neuropsychology, so I guess I can put in my 2
We've
cents.
all probably looked at the brain or the nervous system. But anyway, yeah, so you know then that essentially when the hands go to the neck or me with the wrist, that's like fight or flight. That's the really almost like a spinal cord level reflex, you know. Sometimes it might get as high in the brain as the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain. But so much of this stuff happens even before emotions. It's just a neurological response. And that's a conditioned response. And it's the same response that we might have to public speaking or something, you know, like literally that life-threatening physiology. That can be trained like anything else. We can learn how to breathe. We can learn how to expand, you know, our perspective on possibilities and all kinds of things, so that we don't live in almost this constant fight or flight. Lower brain versus, you know, prefrontal cortex. It's likely that humans, maybe dolphins or something, are the only other creatures that might have a prefrontal cortex and that can understand perspective, you know. And maybe Miriam is raising her voice, but it doesn't mean she's angry at me, you know, because, you know, but my amygdala or my spinal cord level can't understand that. So it goes to the 100,000-year-old wiring where if I feel scared inside, there must be danger. Like I correlate that must mean I'm in danger. It doesn't mean, you know, from that part of the brain. The higher brain can say, oh, I'm noticing when Miriam raises her voice or she uses a certain tone, I get like triggered. I wonder what that's about. You know, I wonder if I could be present with this experience and learn from it and maybe integrate something and become more whole as a result.
Yeah. Let it go.
Maybe even let it go.
And that's, again, inviting the field of possibility. It's like, I feel scared. I feel threatened. And what other possibility do I have than the normal conditioned response of thinking I'm going to die and then maybe even, you know, lashing out at somebody who didn't deserve it in the first place because they're not really attacking me, right? So again, the inviting the field of possibilities is, what else is there? What other possibility? And I tend to say to people, that is not that what happened then is not what's happening right now. Right now, we're standing here or sitting here talking to each other.
Yeah.
It feels like something else, but your feelings aren't necessarily telling you what's actually happening in that particular case. Bobby, you looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, the whole fight or flight conversation, I just thought of that in a new way, because that tension that I described earlier of the manager of the new firm who has just written a big check and the advisor who has risked his business to make this one thing happen, if there is only a plan A. And it is astonishing to me how often that is the case, but it is more often than not is the case. There's like one plan, here's what we're doing, here's how it's going to work. And if you only have one plan, then fight or flight is pretty much, you know, I'm either going to make this happen or my boss is going to be pissed, my wife is going to be pissed, and my clients are going to be pissed. Nobody's going to be happy at this decision. So you're setting up that fight or flight. And rather than inviting in the field of all possibilities, we're inviting in our lizard brain as the chairman of the board, and creating that fight or flight. And with this invitation that we've been discussing about inviting in the field of all possibilities, it just is creating a sense, well, if that doesn't work, we'll try this. If that doesn't work, we'll try this. And I had this conversation with my brother a few weeks back. My older brother and younger brother are both fix-it geniuses. Anything that breaks, they're the two guys that you can do that. And that totally skipped me in the context of fixing mechanical things. And I was talking about that to my older brother, and he said something to me that was like just this big, beautiful, brilliant aha moment. He's like, you don't lack any skills, you just give up too quickly. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he's like, let me guess. You want to fix something, you go to a YouTube video, you listen to the YouTube video, you think, okay, I know how to do this now. You go out, and if that YouTube video doesn't work out in any way, it's almost like give up, that's accurate. That's the way that I kind of currently do things. And he goes, David and I never do that. It's like, that didn't work. What's next? What's next? What's next? And he kind of did a little psychic mind read. He goes, I imagine that's the way that you go into a sales presentation. And, he's heard the thing that you just have to have more ways of asking them to say yes than they have of saying no. And, sooner or later, you're going to get to yes, ultimately. And he goes, that's the way that when we're going to fix something, we go into it with that mindset. And I'm, in essence, I think that's what we're talking about. They just have I have a very small toolbox. I can carry my entire toolbox in one hand, and I'm not stressed or strained. But there's a lot of tools I need that are not in that box. And, that's when I call somebody. And by exploring things and learning more and cultivating more potential answers, you are, in essence, clearing your mind and getting your body relaxed and free. And I'm guessing, Fred, in your martial arts, being relaxed and flexible and not too rigid, probably important. Success. Yeah. Rigidity is not always our friend.
No.
Always.
Depends on the
there
context.
Are other situations where there's like, well, I've tried this and this and this and this and this, or I know from experience that this thing is the only thing that's going to work. And sometimes that is the case, or at least this thing is the only thing I can think of that's going to work. And sometimes that is the case. That is the thing that works and nothing else works. So sometimes I see possibilities, but there is one. It's like a mathematical problem. 1 + 1 is 2. And it's generally not going to be anything else. So the idea of exercising the field and coming to a conclusion that this possibility, this one, and only this one is the one. That does happen. It doesn't mean you're rigid. It's the opposite, actually, I think. It's having been open and then realizing, nope, it's this one. Or at least that's the one I can see. I can see you looking around, Bobby. What's the reflection?
Well, and I'm liking that. I think that as you go through the process of looking and exploring lots of possibilities, it does also serve the function of getting us to have a little bit more confidence. If you've looked at plan A from lots of different angles and it is stood all of the investigation and you've explored B, C, D, E, and F and E, then you have a little bit more confidence moving forward with that. So you're going to not second guess as much. But I'm still feeling the, going into it with some other ideas just makes it less stressful.
Except
As
for
an
there's
experience in the moment.
that was an all three talking at once moment.
Whoops. We
Go
don't
ahead,
usually
Miriam.
do that. That was pretty funny. Fred, do you want to get in here?
Sure, I'll go. Something, Bobby, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, and I can't remember the author's name. He's a really successful basketball coach, professional basketball, and his book is called The Power of Negative Thinking, which is a great title because it's kind of contrarian. But basically, what he's talking about is considering in advance. You're talking about Plan B. He's talking about what could go wrong. Let's consider those possibilities. So we have, if not a full plan, at least some kind of idea of how we're going to respond to changing circumstances. Because I don't know what famous general said this, but the quote is, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Right. And so, it's funny because then there's this whole reaction to that. Like, no, I don't want to think negative. I don't want to bring those negative possibilities into being. I don't want to give that any energy, blah, 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 and I get it. I do. And I think there's some validity to that, actually, that you could actually, I don't know, you get a law of attraction here or something, but, to what extent you create like a resonance in life with certain kind of circumstances based on the energy, how you're vibrating. And I really do believe that's relevant. Okay. And that is not the same as being aware that things could go to shit. It could happen. You shouldn't invest like every last nickel you have on a hot stock tick. You should probably keep a little back just in case, whatever wasn't as reliable as you thought. And so, this is very much the thing that I talk about all the time, which is, the in the world, but not of the world perspective. That, it's wonderful to realize that our true nature is not of this world. And from within that perspective, anything is possible. And it's just, that perspective provides me with just such an incredible source of peace and well-being and freedom that I would never want to deny that. And at the same time, we do live in this world. And there are certain realities to this three-dimensional world, like gravity and et cetera, that can occur regardless of what we may think or not want to think about it. So I'll leave it at that.
It's The Power of Negative Thinking by Bob Knight.
That's the guy. And do you know who he coached? Some famous basketball team.
Hoosiers.
I can look it up.
Indiana Hoosiers. I know.
The who?
The Indiana Hoosiers.
The who? Oh, it's college basketball.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he might have gone to Texas Tech or something, but he's famous for Indiana.
Yeah. And so he wrote that book.
The idea of like, don't bring in any negative vibes or any negative thinking. It seems to me that is, you're going to run into that more frequently when there is only a plan A, when we're only currently, from our current mindset and our current level of presence, we're only seeing one possibility. This is the only way. Then the idea, well, what if that doesn't work? If there is no other, if it is something that we truly have to make work, then you don't want to hear any of that negative thinking. you know, our guy in Whiplash wouldn't want somebody, you know, talking to him about whether or not being under the control of this band leader even makes sense at this point. You know, he's single-minded, and there's a place for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also invites the, you know, don't hit me with the negative vibes, man. I'm working on the law of attraction.
That's actually cool. You had me thinking about when Sylvester Stallone. He wrote Rocky.
Yeah.
And he took it to everywhere, got turned down. And he just, you know, the single-mindedness. He was going to play the lead in his own movie that he wrote. And he was not, I mean, he sold his dog to have enough money to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was not giving up on this. He believed in himself and he believed in the script and that it was going to be a hit. And somebody finally agreed with him. He ended up buying his dog back many years later.
Yeah. You know, they offered him $250,000, like Warner Brothers or something, but you can't star in the movie.
Yeah.
And he said no.
No. They did, yeah. And it's, I mean, sometimes single-minded. I mean, for me, that's not rigidity. That's trusting your gut.
Yeah. Back to that conversation.
Yeah. And so this idea of field of possibility, we're not saying don't listen to yourself. And if you believe strongly in something and it really feels like the right thing to do, I mean, I think that's part of the thing, is like the field of possibility will allow you to consider other possibilities. And that helps you know, kind of like what you said, Bobby, right? It helps you know which way to go because you've been open to other possibilities, and then you know.
Well,
right?
and then it also helps you make that, you know, going back to the person who's being in an abusive relationship, once they acknowledge I could leave, there's nothing keeping me here, I'm not a prisoner, I'm choosing to stay here. It may not necessarily make the current circumstances all that much better, but it breaks them out of that pattern and it creates a space for some fresh thinking to flow in as well. And, you know, he got the offer from Warner Brothers. He may or may not have considered it. You know, we don't know how down on his luck, and, you know, maybe for like a solid week, he was sitting there going, God, I should take the money. And every one of his friends was saying, take the money. You had to sell your dog. This is stupid. Give up. And perhaps that was rattling around in his head. And he said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ride this horse all the way to the end. So I'm making stuff up that may or may not have happened, but assuming that did happen, that gives him a little bit more intestinal fortitude to continue on that journey that he's on by considering that and saying no. And as opposed to, you know, like these advisors that I work with, all too often, you know, the decision that they said, I'm gonna leave until the deal is signed, is about 6 weeks. I've had some, because I've been doing this work long enough, I'm now getting people who are saying, I'm thinking about leaving, and I'm thinking about leaving at the end of this year. And let's have a conversation about what I should be doing between now and then so that I'm ready. And that's just such a different experience.
Yeah.
And so.
This has me thinking about something we haven't talked about yet today, as far as I have noticed, but would be a really good topic for the Presence Posse another time. And that is ambivalence.
Presence and ambivalence.
Because when we bring up the field of possibilities, and when we're in between, we're in two minds. Yeah. This or this. And they kind of are about the same in our bodies and our systems. What do I choose? And then getting stuck in that. I don't know what to choose. I don't know what to choose. And being present to that situation, because sometimes there is no better answer, the one or the other, and we need to choose something. So that could be an interesting topic for the Presence Posse.
Yeah, could be.
We are coming towards the end of the hour, and I thought for once I would give us enough time before we ran out of an hour time to talk about what's coming up for us. Bobby, I know you're doing some magical things in our mindful life. Would you like to say something about what's going on for you and what people can look forward to?
Sure. I'm going to be running a class / R&D, research and development experiment. I have a process that I take clients through that is very successful. 90+% of the people who start it finish it and get the advertised result. And I've only ever done this one-to-one, and I've got over 150 people have gone through it one-to-one. And I'm interested in rolling it out to a bigger, broader audience. And I'm recording an audiobook in conjunction with that. And I'm going to be running a class starting in the next month, teaching these principles that I've taught to the one-on-one people, but teaching it one-to-many. I'm not going to promise any type of results because I've never done it this way before, and I have no idea if it'll work or not. But if you are interested in exploring the type of presence stuff that we talk about in my group on Facebook called Our Mindful Life, I'm going to be over the next 10 days releasing a lot of information about what that program is and what it is not. And if you're curious about exploring it, Our Mindful Life is free, and that's currently the best way to get a hold of me and this work. I do also want to say that we are releasing all of our past conversations, which we're coming up on 100. We'll hit that, I think, in April, but I need to double check that again. And we're releasing all of those as a podcast. So if you listen to podcasts and you have some place that you go, you should be able to find the Presence Posse there as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bobby, and thank you for doing the podcast work for us. We really appreciate it. I choose to speak for the entire posse. Fred, what's going on with you?
Well, I'm really excited about what Bobby is doing. Other than that, I do find myself currently with a couple of open coaching spaces, which I haven't had much lately. So if there's anybody who would like to explore that possibility, the idea of one-to-one, really kind of an intimate relationship, at least the way I see coaching. And by intimate, obviously I don't mean weird intimate, but I also don't mean like it doesn't mean you have to reveal your deepest, darkest secrets kind of intimate. It doesn't mean really that you have to reveal much detail about your life at all. If you don't want to, you're welcome to. But because the kind of intimacy that I'm referring to is the intimacy of, it's going to sound corny, but like two souls recognizing each other, like the whole point of the coaching, and the way I do it at least, is about, not talking so much about spirituality and true self and all that stuff, but just going there. Like, let's just go there and let your brain begin to create some circuitry to get back there. And so it's kind of a magical space. that we get to co-create, and I like it a lot. I'm just constantly amazed that I get to do that with, like spend my day doing that. And I happen to have a couple of spaces. So if there are people out there, and I know the thousands of people that are going to be watching this podcast or listening to us, then I would love to talk to you. And Miriam has put, I guess all we see there is an email address, which is fine. You can email me at drfred@energyrichliving.net, and I would be very happy to discuss those possibilities with you.
And how about you,
Lovely.
Miss Miriam?
Thank you very much, Bobby. I'm just really enjoying listening to the two of you and getting really excited about the stuff that you offer. And I know I have learned a lot from you during the entire time we've been doing Presence Posse, and I get kind of thrilled thinking about the opportunities that people have by using your services. So I think that's really cool. I am also in a situation where I have a few openings and I've expanded my practice. So I have several different things that I do. I am a therapist, a psychotherapist, so I do therapy or offer therapy, but I'm also a coach and an instructor and educator. So I like the idea of teaching people how to take care of themselves and manage life so that they don't need me anymore. That's kind of the goal, is you just don't need me anymore. Or at least, I mean, life is like that. We sometimes end up in crises and we need somebody to talk to, or maybe need some help getting through. But in general, I like being able to help people learn how to take care of themselves so that they don't have to need me all the time. So if you're interested in something like that, please don't hesitate to contact me. And the information is at the bottom of the screen. I also have an online course called Undefiable. And it, just like it sounds, it is a 12-week course to train in a lot of the things that we talk about in the Presence Posse, but training essential life skills in order to become and be undefiable in your life. So if you are noticing that you back down easily, you give up on yourself, you make promises you don't keep, you don't really know where you're going, or you think you know where you're going, but you're not doing anything to act on it, please consider taking Undefiable. There are two options. One is to do it all self-study, and another is to do it with support, so that there are group sessions throughout the 12 weeks to have answer questions and check that you're doing the exercises in the way they're meant to be done. So you can go to my website, which is also on the bottom of the page here. You can see the address and have a look at that. So that's where I'm at. And next week, we don't know what our topic is, but it might be presence and ambivalence. We'll see.
I like that.
We will let you know in our free Facebook group called the Presence Posse. So keep an eye out in our group for next week's topic. And I would like to thank all of those of you who have been watching and commenting and laughing with us and being confused with us and reflecting with us during our talk today. Hopefully being inspired by us as well. And of course, I would like to thank my fellow Posse pals, Dr. Fred Blum and Bobby Cobb, and I'm Miriam Siegel. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to you guys. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take good care.
Bye.